Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin with breaking news out of the White House. Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta has officially resigned. This comes after backlash over his role in Jeffrey Epstein's plea deal in 2008. A reminder, billionaire Jeffrey Epstein is a registered sex offender and was arrested over the weekend on charges of sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy. And President Trump says it was Acosta's decision. So I want to bring in Kira Phillips at the White House. Kira, what changed in the last couple of days? You know, he was defending himself just a few days ago.
He was saying a lot of great things about the labor secretary and what a terrific job that he is doing. And I can tell you firsthand, Kimberly, this was a total shock to everybody. We were just preparing for the normal departure of the president as he was getting ready to head to Milwaukee for an event. And so we had a number of questions lined up from all the issues that we wanted to talk to him about. As you know, when he leaves like this, he comes up to the press and he answers questions. But as you can see by the video, this was the big shock. Labor Secretary Alex Acosta walked out with him. Everybody looked at each other, stunned. Nobody expected this. So he walks up to the mics, and it's very hard to hear because of the helicopter. And the president's talking about the Labor Secretary, what a great job he has done, how well the economy is doing, how jobs are up. And after this long, basically lift-up speech about the secretary, he says, so we're really going to miss him. And that's where everybody once again looked at each other and said, what did he say? And that's when the labor secretary stepped to the mic and said he was going to resign, that it was his decision. He called the president and said, I do not want this Jeffrey Epstein story to be a distraction to what my job is supposed to be as labor secretary. And so I am leaving the White House. I did have a chance to ask a couple questions to the president and also Secretary Acosta. Let's take a listen and see what you have here.
Two questions, please. With regard to Jeffrey Epstein, do you have any suspicion that he was arrested?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea. I haven't spoken to him in many, many years, but I did have no idea.
Secretary Acosta, now that you're resigning, you regret that speech that you talked about.
I've already talked about the Epstein matter. I gave a press conference that, according to the media, was longer than any other cabinet official in this administration. You know, I will reiterate what I said previously.
I was not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein, and you watched people yesterday saying that I threw him out of a club. I didn't want anything to do with him. That was many, many years ago. It shows you one thing, that I have good taste, okay?
And that was almost the entire exchange that I was able to have with the president there. So now the labor secretary is out. The president also announcing second in command, Patrick Pizzella, will become the acting labor secretary immediately. And it'll be interesting to see how things continue to play out on this story. And we were looking at the numbers. I was trying to remember how many cabinet members this now is, Kimberly, that have departed the administration. Acosta is now the 9th cabinet member in the Trump administration to depart.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And Kira, I just want to ask you, what message does it send for President Trump to be standing next to a man who helped Jeffrey Epstein in a plea deal?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. He clearly did not lift up Jeffrey Epstein, said he didn't like him, said that they had a falling out, said he had no idea about Epstein's behavior. He in no way, shape, or form said he had any respect for Jeffrey Epstein, even though we know they have had a personal relationship and Epstein has spent time at Mar-a-Lago, which, by the way, the president did confirm he did kick Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. And then the president just continued to lift up the labor secretary, that he's a Hispanic, that he went to Harvard, that he's done an incredible job as labor secretary, and didn't even go into talking about the plea deal that the labor secretary had made almost a decade ago regarding Epstein. So he defined the line, definitely, not talking well about Epstein and talking very well about his labor secretary as he took on the job there at the White House.
All right, Kira Phillips right there at the White House. Thank you so much. And guys, we did see that more victims have come forward since this resignation. So we're going to move on to a storm that is set to hit the Gulf Coast this weekend. It has a name. It's Tropical Storm Barry. It's heading toward Louisiana, and it's likely to bring life-threatening flash floods and the potential to turn into a hurricane. So I want to bring in Rob Marciano in New Orleans. Rob?
Hi, Kimberly. We've had showers and sunbreaks all morning long as the northern fringes of Tropical Storm Barry make their way towards the Louisiana coast. Here in New Orleans, we sit atop the west bank of the Mississippi River, which has been in flood stage for weeks because of all the rain they had in the Midwest this incredibly wet spring, trying to drain to the Gulf of Mexico, which is that way. That's the way the river should flow, but you kind of see the winds are pushing the waves at the surface this way. So that's where we're going to get the storm surge today and tomorrow, with the winds pushing against that flow, in essence backing up the water and lifting it up to higher levels here with some backwater flooding atop these levees, which are not all at this height around this city. On average, are about 20 feet. The Army Corps of Engineers told me that they don't anticipate overtopping, but they may get it in some spots. If that does happen, these levees are designed to be overtopped, and they shouldn't fail. On top of that, they've closed the floodgates more than they have in history here across New Orleans. So that should protect them as well. But we're going to have rainfall rates of easily over an inch an hour. And when that happens here in the city of New Orleans, which sits below sea level, the pumps that pump that water out can't keep up. So I think we're going to see some flash flooding here, especially during the morning hours tomorrow and right on through the afternoon. The core of the heaviest rain looks to be right over Baton Rouge, the capital city, which had a horrible flood back in 2016 from a tropical system that wasn't even named. So this could be even a bigger problem there as it makes landfall, likely around Morgan City, Louisiana, tomorrow morning as a strong tropical storm or a Category 1 hurricane. We will see some wind damage at those levels, especially with the saturated ground. These trees in some spots will come down, not just here, but well inland and through Mississippi, Alabama, and really the Florida Panhandle, where flash flood watches remain posted. So, Tropical Storm Barry making its way towards the Louisiana coastline. A historic event, regardless of what transpires here with this river running so high and a tropical system with so much moisture coming in here. It's going to be a long weekend in New Orleans. Kimberly?
All right, thank you, Rob. We appreciate it. Tropical Storm Barry. So to get the latest track on this storm, I'm joined by ABC News meteorologist Melissa Griffin. Tell me what is going on.
Yes, so once again, latest update from the National Hurricane Center comes in at 11 o'clock, and we have the newest numbers. And hurricane hunters were just inside of the hurricane. They were getting all the data and researching on how much Barry has strengthened over the last couple of hours, and it has. So we are up to 65-mile-per-hour winds with Tropical Storm Barry. You can see it right there, 100 miles southwest of the mouth of the Mississippi River. It's moving so slowly, though. West-northwest at 5 miles per hour. But the big takeaway here, what the hurricane hunters did find, is that it's strengthening. So that's why we're going to be watching over the next 12 to 24 hours how much it strengthens as it approaches the coast of Louisiana. So you can see the track now. This is the latest track out. You can see now that we are expecting it could potentially become a Category 1 hurricane just as it reaches landfall somewhere near Morgan City, Louisiana. That's Saturday morning, 75-mile-per-hour winds. So sometime between late tonight into early Saturday morning is when we're expecting landfall for Tropical Storm Barry or potentially Hurricane Barry. And this is where we see the storm surge. Storm surge could be 2 to 4 feet in parts of Mississippi and Louisiana. And on the southern coast of Louisiana, the storm surge could be 3 to 6 feet. So that is 6-foot inundation possible as Tropical Storm or Hurricane Barry approaches the coast and makes landfall. So we're very concerned about the water. We're very concerned about the storm surge. And of course, it's the rain. It's the flash flood threat that I am the most concerned about. Whether it becomes a hurricane or not, I think is, regardless, we're going to see devastating flash flooding because we're forecasting 10 to 25 inches of rain. So that's over 2 feet of rain possible in some spots. And we're just hoping that heavy, heavy rain band doesn't set up right over the city of New Orleans. And
they've already had rain. They've already had some severe storms. So what do you think about this? They say that the water is rising to maybe like 19 feet. So if there is more flooding, is that going to push it over the levee? Like, what do we know about that?
So the biggest concern with that is this actually hasn't happened before. So the Mississippi River has never been this high with 25 inches of rain on the way. So this is actually an unprecedented situation, and it's hard to determine exactly how these levees are going to be able to handle something like this. So this is a real test for the levees, with the Mississippi River already in flood stage and rising due to all the rain and the storm surge on the way. It's really going to put a test to those levees. So we're really going to have to see, and hopefully they can handle it.
Yeah, and if you look at those images there, I mean, it's already pretty incredible. Like, I can't imagine like driving through those streets like that. So I want to, I want to bring in Professor Richard Campanella. As we mentioned, you know, the fear of a hurricane in New Orleans is increased exponentially, given many of the residents lived and survived the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. So, Professor Richard, you know, you have studied the history and geography of New Orleans intimately, and I just want you to remind us how this city is laid out that makes this storm so dangerous.
Well, we are on a fluvial delta, which is a pretty unusual piece of geography. And very briefly, our entire landscape is only about 7,000 or 8,000 years old, and it was built by a high overtopping Mississippi River. That's what delivered the sediment. As a result of this, we have this peculiarity here where the areas closest to the river, where historic New Orleans was originally built, are the highest around. So it's the exact opposite of most other places where water and rivers carve down. Here, water built up. So we are a product of the Mississippi River. It's always overtopped. But, of course, this is incompatible with having a sustainable metropolis here. And so over 300 years, we've shored up the natural levee by building artificial levees to prevent the river from overtopping. So what's unique about this particular circumstance, it is the longest, highest, latest high river. It's usually a springtime phenomena intersecting with an early storm that has its own storm surge. And so the river cannot flow out smoothly into the Gulf of Mexico because it's a hill of water, and so it backs up on itself. So that's what makes this very unusual. The good news is that as of yesterday, I went out with a colleague and did some surveillance on the levees, and we got new data in, and I believe we're going to have sufficient room to store that excess water. At least in the metro area. It might be a little bit different down in Lower Plaquemines Parish. So I think what we're in for is more kind of rainfall-caused flash flooding events. So we shall see.
Yes, we shall see. Have you talked to any of the residents there? Like, how are they feeling knowing that, you know, they survived another tragedy years ago? What's the conversation?
Well, I am a resident, and I survived Katrina, too. I'm here on Tulane's campus, and I'm looking out the window at the gray skies. I would say the general sentiment among my neighbors and friends and peers here is one of a little bit nervousness. Just the other morning, we had an unrelated heavy rainstorm that inundated many streets with nuisance flooding and flooded a lot of cars. And so they're dealing with that. I think there's a general sense that the levees will be able to hold the river water. And, you know, folks are hunkering down. Some have left, but most are still here. And businesses, as of right now, are more open than they are closed.
All right, and so I appreciate that, and I want to stick with the storm and bring in Zachary Keish, who's also in Louisiana. Zachary, are you finding that people are preparing differently than they did before, like back when Katrina happened?
Well, thanks for having me, Kimberly. First of all, I wasn't here necessarily for Katrina, but it was a completely different storm, right? The main issue with Katrina is that the infrastructure failed. And so the Army Corps of Engineers and other officials here have said that there have been improvements made in those particular areas. And for the most part, we're seeing people hunker down. We did hear from the mayor yesterday. She's encouraging people to just be prepared in terms of food, water, medicine, those types of things in the event that this thing, you know, lasts a number of days.
Do people seem like they're worried, or do they feel like they're adequately prepared?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think that in this part of the country, certainly for folks that have grown up here in New Orleans, these types of storms are something that they are in many ways accustomed to. What is particularly unique about this, and it's something that we've heard from a number of the other people that we talked to, is these levels. So this is the Mississippi right here. We're just across the Mississippi from downtown New Orleans. So we're in Algiers Point here. This is the Mississippi that we're looking at here, and the levels are up. And the concern is that the combination of these high flood levels with the power of this storm and the surge that could come as a byproduct of that could cause lots of damage here. But the energy in the city doesn't seem to be one of concern at this particular point.
All right, Zachary Quiche right there in Louisiana as well. Thank you so much for everything. And guys, we turn to the immigration battle, where at least 10 major cities across the U.S. are bracing for sweeping raids from immigration officials as early as Sunday. This is the second threat by the Trump administration in less than a month, leaving many undocumented people in fear. And our Matt Gutman spoke to an undocumented woman preparing for the worst in Los Angeles. So take a listen.
Are you afraid?
Yes, I a lot of scary because for immigration.
So this Sunday, do you plan to have the shades closed and extra food in the fridge?
Yes, of course, because I go yesterday on the market because for prepare.
All right, so I want to bring in Amy Hollyfield at KGO TV in San Francisco. Amy, as a sanctuary city, is San Francisco prepared for this? How are people preparing?
Well, as a sanctuary city, politicians are getting the word out that local politicians, local police are not a part of this. They don't want any association with it whatsoever. The mayor of Oakland, right across the bay from San Francisco, even putting out the word to immigrants that they are safe here, that they are loved here, and to not assume that any local politicians or agencies are participating in this, and letting everyone know that this is the federal government that is doing this.
I'm really curious, what resources do people have to help them through this situation?
Activists have really pulled together and gotten very organized. They've got teams of lawyers ready to go. They've set up hotlines where they want to push out information that will help people, but also to keep information flowing about where arrests are happening, if they are. And in fact, they have been reporting that they're hearing that arrests have already started. So that hotline helps keep that network going. Then they've got the lawyers. And then another point of organization for everyone has been rallies and protests. We've seen those day after day here at the ICE headquarters here in San Francisco, and we're expecting one today. Today's is going to be more of a prayer vigil and interfaith gathering. Yesterday, hundreds of loud protesters. And then they've also been handing out cards to people, letting them know their rights, encouraging them, reminding them that they do not have to answer the door, that federal agents cannot come inside without a search warrant. So if they just stay inside and don't answer the door, that's a smart move for them. So they've got a bunch of different channels on how they are responding and getting ready for this.
All right, Amy Hollyfield in San Francisco, we appreciate that. And guys, this uncertainty is no doubt traumatic for families, parents scared of deportation and children scared of being separated from their parents. Remember, a few Democratic members of Congress visited those detention centers last week, and here's one of them, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, testifying today. Take a listen.
Mr. Speaker, we do have a crisis at our border. It is one of morality. As we have seen this current strategy unfold, intentional and cruelly created by the Trump administration, dead set on sending a hate-filled message that those seeking refuge are not welcome in America, in our America, and that the rule of law, human rights will not protect them here. Instead, Mr. Chairman, it's a dangerous ideology that rules our nation right now.
Yeah, pretty emotional there. So I want to bring in Dr. Sally Goza. She's president-elect at the American Academy of Pediatrics to talk more about the effects of these traumas. Dr. Goza, you've also visited these facilities, yes?
I have.
Yeah, can you just give us details of what you've seen when you've gone inside?
So first and foremost, as a pediatrician, we truly think that children do not belong in Customs and Border Protection facilities, but because they are there, we feel like that they need to be able to be safe and as healthy as they can be and be taken care of by a pediatrician or a pediatric trained provider while in the custody of the U.S. government. When we toured Ursula, I'm going to break it down into three things: what I heard, what I saw, and what I smelled. And so when I first walked in, it was a mixture of smell of sweat, urine and feces, and then I heard some rustling sound, and it was the Mylar blankets. The immigrants were under the Mylar blankets, and you could see their heads popping up, but it was really that rustling sound. There was very little other sound, not a lot of laughter or talking or anything. And then what we saw cages. It was wire fencing in cages where these people were staying, and they were sleeping on the floor. Some had mats, but the Mylar blankets, and their eyes. The children's eyes were just bloodshot. They obviously were not getting much rest, and they were bug-eyed. They were that fear in their eyes of what's going to happen next, what's happening to me, and those kind of things. And so those were my impressions as I walked through the facility.
And I just want to ask you, what happens, in your opinion, to a person who's living in fear for this amount of time? What's the impact of this detention?
So as a pediatrician, we know this is not good for the short and long-term health of children, both physically and mentally. That kind of stress makes children be on high alert, red alert, where their brain can't do the things that are really the work of childhood, which is learning and playing. And if this stress is prolonged and goes on for a long time, it becomes a thing called toxic stress, which we know can change the architecture of a child's brain, that will cause lifelong problems with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, developmental issues, and behavioral problems.
It's unbelievable. So, Dr. Sally Goza, I appreciate you being with us today, again, from the American Academy of Pediatrics. We appreciate it. And guys, we move on to embattled singer R. Kelly. He was arrested again, taken into custody while walking his dog yesterday in Chicago. He's facing a 13-count indictment and charges of federal child pornography and obstruction of justice. So I'm joined by Stephanie Wash with more details. First, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Stephanie, I feel like this is becoming one of those things where it's hard to keep up with because he's in and out of court. Are these charges new?
Yeah, it's definitely hard to keep up with. These are new charges. We're talking about two separate federal indictments that came down yesterday. The first was actually a 13-count indictment that was returned by a federal grand jury in Chicago. Now, in that, they're charging Kelly with conspiracy to defraud the U.S., coercion, child pornography, among other things. It's all stemming from alleged sexual contact that he had in the 90s with 5 minor females. And apparently that sexual contact was allegedly recorded according to the records. Interesting about this indictment, Kelly and his former business manager are actually being charged with obstructing justice, and it's being alleged that they paid victims and witnesses not to cooperate with law enforcement, including in that 2008 trial where he was acquitted on all charges. Also, 5-count indictment out of the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn that charges him with racketeering.
Wow. So that's quite a bit. So what I want to ask you is, this new arrest, is this stemming from the documentary by chance, Surviving R. Kelly? Does that have anything to do with this new arrest coming forward?
Yeah, most certainly. It stemmed directly from Surviving R. Kelly, the Lifetime documentary. The case out of New York especially, a Homeland Security investigations agent actually watched the documentary. That spurred the investigation, and that's why we're here today with this indictment.
So he's going to be in jail at least over the weekend until he has the bond hearing, yes?
For sure, and he's scheduled to actually be in court again this afternoon for what's called a removal hearing. Authorities will seek to extradite him to Brooklyn at some point to face those charges. And no word yet from the Cook County State's attorney how these two new indictments might affect his current criminal case in Chicago.
All right, Stephanie Wash, thank you for the details. Unbelievable case, right? So guys, as you know, we talk about self-care and mental health a lot in this space. And earlier this week, I sat down with a woman that I've wanted to have a self-care conversation with for a very long time, Dr. Jessica Clemens, or if you're one of her 61,000 Instagram followers and you know her as Dr. Jess. She's a psychiatrist using her social media to effortlessly break down the stigmas around therapy and mental wellness, one post at a time. So take a look. Tell people what a safe space actually means.
Well, when I use that term, it means a place where there really isn't sort of judgment. Sure, we all judge people that we interact with, but it's about how you sort of recognize that that's a way that we interact and work to sort of not bring those judgments up into sort of a conversation. And really listening to understand, being empathic. And so a safe space is where, you know, your experience is just as important as someone else's experience, and we're all really just trying to learn and support one another. I think that's another important piece when I at least mentions a safe space.
Yeah.
It's a supportive environment as well.
Definitely. I think, you know, there's lots of conversation about self-care now. And I think for some people it may feel inaccessible because it's about the things, what you buy, the massages you get, or the products that you have to purchase. But what you provide is, you know, just the idea that you really do the work with yourself. So what does self-care mean to Dr. Jess?
Yes. So it means the opposite of what most people think. It's not about getting, you know, your nails done or spending money in a spa. It's really about paying attention to what's going on internally. And it took me a while to really learn that. It actually was during my residency when I recognized there's an internal world. Before it'd be like, what are you talking about?
Absolutely.
But I learned that what that means is the internal world is made up of your feelings, your thoughts, and if you sit a little bit with yourself, you'll start to sort of be in tune with that. And so self-care is really being in tune with what you feel like you need. Hey, if you had a long work week and your body's saying, I need rest, rest. That is self-care. If you've had a difficult time in a relationship and you need some support and you want to call up
or you need to cry?
Yes, absolutely. Cry. You know, so it's really learning how to pay attention to the messages that your own body is telling you. It's not about spending a bunch of money to sort of mask what's actually happening.
And you're on Instagram. It's not like actually a therapy session, but it feels that way, just getting like that little nugget that you need in the middle of the day. So energy, for example, and the people that you have around you. So give me your nugget on who your tribe, your circle is, and how that impacts your self-care.
My personal tribe? Or anyone?
In general.
In general.
I think your tribe is good, though.
Yeah, my tribe is pretty good.
You have Beyonce in your tribe. If Beyonce's in your tribe, the tribe is solid, period.
Period, right? Well, I think I would say to reflect, look for people that really reflect who you want to become or who you are becoming. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to cut ties with people who aren't sort of reflecting that, but just be really cognizant of who you're investing your time in.
Okay, toxic people, this sort of goes with this.
It does. So, you know, one of the really cool things that Swiss Beats actually said was, you know, toxic people can be in your family.
They sure can.
They sure can. And so one of the things that he shared at the Be Well conversation was, you know, you have to really focus on who makes you happy and what makes you happy and really block out those people who don't. And that sounds a little critical and harsh.
It's hard sometimes.
It's hard.
It's hard.
But in order to really reach the places that you want to go, you really have to do an appraisal of who's around. And again, it can be something simple as just spending a little bit less time with those people who are toxic and more time with the people who make you feel good.
So this sort of goes along with that, but boundaries.
Boundaries are so important.
They're essential.
They're essential.
Yes.
And that is a question that I get a lot in my direct messages, my DMs, is, you know, I feel guilty about setting boundaries. But again, if you do not set boundaries, people will do anything to you that they feel. And boundaries are just simply letting people know where you stand and what's reasonable when they interact with you.
It was a beautiful conversation, and just a reminder that self-care is not something you have to purchase. It's just taking care of yourself by yourself in your own time. So my friends, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.
ABC News, straightforward.